VLEZZ. Yeah, man. Welcome back to the here and now. I bet you clicked this video either because you're extremely radical and amazing person just overall, or maybe you're looking to revolutionize the way you're sampling. This here video, I'm going to try and explain to you how I think when I sample records and what I do with the samples afterwards in a way that you might not have thought of before. You know what I'm saying? Thing is like this, especially when you start out sampling records, getting into making beats and such, it is very easy to get stuck in a gingerbread man mold way of sampling. People, including myself, tend to just take a sample and loop it. Now, ain't nothing wrong with that, because sometimes a sample is just too damn good a loop to even pick it apart. You know what I'm saying? Just too perfect sometimes. But I want to encourage you to think in a different manner that is gonna hopefully open up a whole new world to you. Granted, I'm not the first person to do this in the world or nothing like that, but if you haven't thought of it, you ought to think about it. So, when I pick up a record and I listen for samples, what do I listen for? Number one, the sound has to be good. It has to sound good, meaning that the instrumentation or the sonics speak to me or touch me in some kind of way. It doesn't really matter what they're playing, what chords they're playing specifically always, or what sequence of chords. We're going to get to that in a second. Other than that, I separate every chord that I hear in my mind. So why do I do this? Let me explanation. What makes music sound good? Well, there's a whole discussion to be had about that, obviously. Many things factor into it, but one of the main things, to stick to this here particular topic at hand, sexting the context, I would say one of the most important things is the sequence of chords together. One chord on its own, not very fun to listen to. Also, on the other hand, a sequence of chords can sound very boring to you, very dull. But taking one of those chords and piecing it into another sequence of chords can very possibly be the whipping cream on the ice cream. Paraphrasing Swedish jazz pianist Jan Johansson, he said something along the ways of, a good composer should be able to bring you to tears with the chord C major, meaning that a sequence of chords leading up to C major, which is pretty much the most regular boring chord you can get, has the full potential of making you cry like a baby, overwhelmed with emotions, if you play your cards right. So how does this relate to anything? Well, my point here, when you get good at this, you can sample 10 different records, Frankenstein a dope beat together, sampling everything that sounds good in its instrumentation and sonics, even though it's just one or two chords in that sequence that you fancy. For one, you will end up with a much more original interpretation of the sample. You're using it more like an instrument than actually just copying another piece of music, and there's more room for imagination and puppet master control. Reason I started doing this in the first place, or the reason I came up with it, was basically from necessity, because I would hear a couple of chords on a song and I would be like, I heard the rest of the bar, I heard the rest of the chord sequence in my head already before I heard it. Like, oh, this is so dope, the two first chords, and then I heard the rest of the melody in my head, and then they went some completely other direction than what I wanted them to go. So I'd be like, oh, god damn it. Well, I'll just have to piece this together myself. And usually, obviously you have to try to keep it sounding somewhat similar to each other. So maybe another record, if it's a piano, find another record with a piano on it. Hopefully there's another part on the same record that you can pick a chord from, and it'll be mixed similarly, and you don't have to reshape it as much in the mix afterwards. But overall, it is very highly possible and very fun. Let me show you right here on a quick example of this. Dangerous! Check them out. This is the first sample I started working with. Obviously, you can tell it is the end of a song, but to me, it was the two first chords. merely the beginning of a great adventure. So in my head, I'm thinking more something like this. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. From another track on the same record, I found this, which I tuned to match the last chord. And I tried experimentationing with it to see if I could find any of the other chords I need. And I was lucky as a motherfucker in this case. Because I could transpose this chord 3 times and still be in the same scale and match all of the chords I was looking for. So in this case, it turned out rather magnificent. Some drums, and yeah, you get the idea. This is how the timing went and everything in my head, and I recreated that simply magnificently. A lot of times the chords aren't as long as you want them to be, so you kind of need to fill out the gaps, and there are several different ways you could do this. This case, I just copied the sample, added some more attack to it, and filled in the gaps. We're gonna make another video on this, and you could do it by, you know, putting a delay on it, by time stretching, reversing the gaps, many different ways. Now come the time to spice it up with some more samples from other records. This here, tuned it to fit the key also. See? Perfect. It fits on there. You can layer it without obstructing the peace of the mankind. Then you just go on building like that. Put a bass line on it, further enforcing it, you know, bringing the melody in the direction that you want it. Originally, the bass line on the second chord went another way with a whole different feel, but we are the masters here. So the thing here is, chords don't even need to be in the same key. You can tune the chords that you sample from somewhere else, and usually are 1 or 2 spots where they fall into the same scale, and you don't need to be good at music theory or whatever. I barely know shit about music theory. You can still get good at it by just listening to it. You'll hear what sounds right or what doesn't. So take another sample, put it next to the first sample, retune it, and play them together, and you'll find a tune where the chord fits in, and that way you can have so much more to work with. You can also force a chord into a chord sequence even though it doesn't really match. If it's just one tone that's off, you could kind of hide it in the bushes in the mix. You know what I'm saying? So easy peasy lemon squeezy number 1. If it's a bass note, all you need to do is high pass it, filter it out, and play your own bass over it, and you'll force it right in place. It's kind of a little bit more tricky if it's one note that's off in like in the middle of a chord. You'll just have to do your best to EQ and filter it out, and probably you will have to mask it with something else, like play a chord over it. Why do we even need to do that at all? Well, there are many situations where I've come to have to do that, and that's if I have a sample playing and there's a big gap in the middle of it, and it's kind of a key element of the beat but still not in focus, but I want to fill out that gap because it just sounds completely stupid going silent there and then coming back in. Obviously you can work around that by, you know, making it seem like it's on purpose or whatever, and working with the rhythms around it to make that gap make sense, but sometimes you just want to fill it out. And in emergency cases, you can take chords that just barely match and mask them, like I said, hide them in the bushes, and you'll be fine, mighty, dandy, all right. Basically, how I think there is, take that element out of focus during that part, and the brain won't even think about it. Just know with you, sometimes it is salvageable, even though they don't match up perfectly. Well, I hope this little tip made any sense at all to you, and that you can make good use of it in your production adventures. If you want to support me, buy one of these radical shirts at beatsclothes.storeenvy.com. Throw a couple bucks onto something on my Bandcamp, or become an astronaut Patreon. All available down below. Okay, bye-bye.